Good afternoon, everyone. Today, it's a pretty cold, sunny day. I went for a run earlier, so I'm feeling pretty good in general, but I'm also cutting myself off from caffeine. I have been, for the past week, haven't had coffee or any caffeine much, except for yesterday. Yesterday, I had like a cup of coffee with some breakfast. So it kind of like threw me off a little bit. So now today I have to actually like go through the day without caffeine, and now my body is used to it. So it's kind of like have to kind of restart a little bit, but it's not so bad. I'm just a little groggy today. Today I want to talk about everybody's favorite person, and that's George Soros. For people who are not familiar with him, you can watch videos. Basically every video you will find about George Soros is incredibly biased, in my opinion, which is a problem when you're trying to learn about someone, is that you're not getting the real information. You're getting a lot of disinformation, and specifically moralistic information, whether he's a great person or he's the evilest person in the history of mankind, which is a little bit disconcerting when you're trying to be meticulous, I would say, when learning about people. When you learn about history, you learn about, any historical figure. The important thing is, when you're looking at them, is to look at them from an objective standpoint. And when you get to these people that become these monolith figures, the same thing happens to Donald Trump, for instance, or Hitler, or Stalin, or pretty much any dictator or any high-powered figure. We lose that sense of understanding them as a person, right? We lose that sense of understanding that these were human beings that went through life, and they made mistakes, or they made decisions that might not have been to the best of human development, so to speak. And I respect George Soros specifically as a person who's interested in financial markets, as someone who's very knowledgeable on the subject, and he's like a powerhouse. Obviously he's made lots of money, which people need to comprehend that that's not easy to do. You need a lot of, first of all, mental discipline, and you need to have that just that drive, so to speak. Another person that's big investment is Warren Buffett, obviously, but he has a much more different mindset, I guess you would call it, different strategy, that's for sure. But when we're talking about George Soros, the information that you're getting anywhere, whether it's a conspiracy thread or it's CNN, it's all kind of fake, right? And people like to think of him as like the puppet master. He's the evil mastermind behind everything, which I don't particularly believe. I think he's just a really rich guy who puts a significant amount of money in like democratic, liberal, left politics, because that's what he believes in. It's honestly, like, compared to what other people invest in politics, it's not even the same caliber. Like, he's spending millions of dollars, but like once you get into that high level of finance and those high level rich people, they're generally very they're spending a lot more money than he is, that's for sure. So it's difficult to say what's exactly going on with him. I don't really care, personally. I don't see anything particularly wrong with what he does exactly. He's kind of just an investment guy, and he's just very, very hardcore with what he does, specifically when he shorted the British pound in the 90s, which is what made him famous and what sort of demonized him. But you go on YouTube and you watch any of these videos, they're basically like, they're mostly based off of assumptions of his general agenda, And people who don't really like that word agenda, like, ooh, they've got this agenda that they want to do something. Everyone has an agenda, right? So, like, it doesn't matter who you are. I have an agenda for today. I'm going to dinner with my family tonight. That's my agenda. You know, like, people have a plan to do things. And with George Soros, you can think whatever you want from him as being evil or as being good or whatever, but you gotta look deep into who he actually is and realize that he is a person, not this lizard king, as much as they want you to think that, which is kind of ironic that there is a they out there. There is a master narrative that is trying to tell you this is how you should think. This is how you should see George Soros as this evil mastermind. And honestly, if I was in that kind of power as a puppet master, I wouldn't want people to know who I was. I wouldn't want to be in the spotlight as this figurehead to put blame on, right? So if there is a puppet master in some secret society or what have you, it's probably someone you don't really know at all. Like, you think of people like Jeffrey Epstein, who only recently became popular because there was this whole scandal that obviously that everyone knows about, but did anybody know who the fuck he was like a year ago? No, they didn't, but he was a very powerful man then, and he was until he died, and then that's when he became famous against his own wishes. George Soros is not like that. He's this public figurehead who's very outspoken and likes to present himself in the light and talks about what he wants to do, and he's pretty damn honest about it, which is sort of like the weird thing that conspiracy theorists try to like nab at him, is that, oh, he even said he was a Nazi. It's like, yeah, he's fucking honest. He's brutally honest about what he did as a kid, what he had to do to survive the Holocaust. He's brutally honest with his investment decisions. He never said that he did this out of some moral obligation or something to save the world. When he was shorting the British pound, he was like, yeah, I wanted to make a shitload of money, and I did that off of the backs of the English bank, whatever you want to call it. So, you know, that's the other thing that's like, okay, so if he is telling the truth about himself, then why are we saying that he's a liar at the same time? It's just kind of confusing to me. I don't really like necessarily care if he's a good or bad person. He's just this really rich guy. It's my opinion that people in high power, specifically in the media, people like to think that they're controlling the narrative, so to speak, but it's really the other way around. They don't really control anything. They're just taking what people already believe in and just sort of like pushing it back and forth for what the people want, right? There are liberal-minded people, and that's what mass media wants to replicate. It's the same thing with right-wing media. With Fox News, the only problem is that it gets super distorted when it goes back and forth between the audience and the media, and they're trying to cater to their audience, and the audience, like, it creates the feedback loop, which is toxic in a way, which is the problem of having an audience-driven media platform, because most people are dumb, to put it simply. Like, they're kind of just really dumb, and the media has to cater to that in order to get viewers, so they say stupid things in order for people to be like, oh yeah, like, yeah, I believe in that, you know? So back to George Soros, you know, I don't really I joke about it on Twitter and stuff, like I think he's like some sort of god or like a really great person, but like I personally don't really care about him morally. I sort of just see him as this very powerful figurehead that's sort of like, okay, like, what can I learn from this person? What has he done that's indicative of just power, right? You can learn a lot from these people if you just look at them objectively, and then you can say, okay, this part doesn't really work with me. This aspect, isn't in line with my best self, so to speak. And I think you can apply that to anybody, whether that's Donald Trump or Hitler or anyone. You can't look at these people as these black and white cartoon villains that have no personality, because they're human beings. They became this way for a reason. And it's not just those powerful figureheads, it's communities of people, whether those are socialists or communists or incels or feminists or anything like that. We like to categorize people as this other kind and demonize them and think that they're sort of special and they're not the same as normal people. The same thing happens with billionaires, or like you talk to people who are, claim to be moralistic and loving of all people, but then they start throwing in things where it's like, oh yeah, I love all people, but like, oh fuck Nazis, I would kill all Nazis. It's like, well, Nazis are people, and that's the problem, is that you need to recognize that these are people and you can become exactly like them. If you don't have that strength of willpower or emotional control or mental discipline, you can easily fall into those ideological traps that the Nazis fell under, and you need to recognize that. Otherwise, we're all fucked. So that's all I have to say, and I'll see you guys in a couple days, because tomorrow I'm going to be busy for the most part. So anyway, that's all I have to say, and have a wonderful rest of the day.